All right, we will bring in two big pieces of our puzzle here on the show. We do it every Wednesday. At this time, it's time for the crossover with Don Taylor and Rick Dhaliwal from Donnie and Dhali, Monday to Friday, 10 to noon on Check TV. What's going on, fellas?
I love the hat, Jimmy. Very good.
Thank you.
Takes me back.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That means a lot. Coming from a Hall of Famer. When a Hall of Famer compliments your hat, that's a big day.
I've never seen Donnie in the same room as Vancouver Canadians gear and not compliment.
It's a great look. What are you going to do? It's a good look.
It's a very underrated year swag in Vancouver. By the way, guys, we have an echo here. We have technical difficulties. Have you got it?
You guys sound great to us.
Okay.
Oh, we don't have an echo? You don't have an echo?
You guys sound fantastic.
We're good.
You're gonna fight through it? All right.
Rick,
we
test
are live.
it. Say something.
We're good.
What?
We're good. It's all better.
Hello,
Rick,
hello.
test it. Hello.
Test.
Give him a Russian
Test,
player's
1, 2, 3,
name to
test.
pronounce.
Test. 1, 2, 3, test.
He just did that.
Live radio, you can't beat it.
All right. Patrik Allvin, the news today. Nice gift for all of us during the bye week. Something to chew on, something to digest. What do you guys make of the Patrik Allvin extension, multi-year, 3-year extension as GM of the Vancouver Canucks?
Yeah, it's such a no-brainer, and it links up with the extension, likewise, that Jim Rutherford signed. Does it seem longer than 2 years that he's been here? There's been a whole lot of work there. 19 trades, I believe, 6 since the start of this season, and most you give the thumbs up to. No-brainer. And then look at the overall standings. This was a no-brainer. And hey, look. Other than Jim Rutherford, who in this town, who knew much about Patrik Allvin? He seemed like a head scratcher and done a pretty good job. And Rick mocks me for this. I've said it for like a couple of weeks now. But depending on how they do in the the first round or two of the playoffs, Jim Gregory award candidate, maybe even the front runner at this point.
He's got to be the front runner.
Who would have guessed it?
He's got to be the front runner.
Right?
He has to be. No question.
Yeah.
Who else would even be in the mix?
Yeah.
Well, the only
Shovel
thing
day
is,
off?
I didn't know this, Thomas, and you might know more about this than I do, or Rick does, believe it or not. But I believe the Jim Gregory Award, Elliott made us aware of this, isn't voted on until the second round of the playoffs, or the second round.
Yeah,
of the
that's
playoffs
true.
is over.
And we do
So
see
that
that. We do see that most years it's like the GMs in the conference final. You know what I mean? Like all 3 of the GMs made the conference final. So they're, but I mean, at this point, interestingly too, the sports books don't take bets on it. So it's not like we can go check and factually tell you who the favorite is. But I mean, to me, if you look at body of work, volume of moves, the scale of the changes, the only other contender at this point in the season, in my view, should be Cheveldayoff. Like it's Allvin with a bullet.
Yeah, for sure. But I love that Allvin has been aggressive. You know, for a guy who hasn't been a GM very long in the NHL, he doesn't hold back. But it helps to have an experienced voice like Rutherford in the building, right? Let's be honest, guys. Jim's got to approve a lot of stuff that goes on, right? And, you got an experienced guy that has been a GM of 3 Stanley Cups right in the same office. People talk about his trades, but what I like about him is July 1st. He's not out there, giving out term and ridiculous bucks. We found out with the previous regime, long-term contracts on July 1st can cripple a team, and he's not doing that. And, we had a poll question, guys, today, and a resounding, they're hiring, Patrik Allvin's hiring of Rick Tocchet. It was number 1 move that our listeners, anyways, said was his best move was getting Rick Tocchet here.
No question.
Hard to
right?
argue with it when you see the performance for how many guys
Before
have
and
improved.
since. It's like the old flying V logo. If you put it on a graph, team's performance pre-Tocchet, team's performance post-Tocchet. It's the flying
good.
V.
Yeah. What did you think?
And you know what?
Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I was going to say one more thing on Tocchet. They obviously knew about him from their days together in Pittsburgh and the success there with Mike Sullivan. But as a head coach, he didn't have that much success. Yeah. So it just seems like a no-brainer now. But and Rick talking, I think a lot of us thought, well, this is going to work because he was a tough hockey player and he was, he won Stanley Cups and all that as a player. But as a head coach, there wasn't a lot of success there. So again, hats off to them for believing in him and seeing what he could do under Mike Sullivan and hiring him with the Canucks. I don't think it was a slam dunk at the time, at least not from the outside looking in.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Tocchet is. If you talk to people around the league too, they all say the same things. Look at the job that Tocchet has done in Vancouver. Bottom line, this core's been here a long time. Why is this core taken off under him and not the previous two coaches? Well, guess what? He's a big reason why.
I bet there's a lot of teams that are looking around and wishing that they had offered Rick Tocchet, given the job that he's done here. I mean, again, they obviously had confidence in him, but they've said we didn't even expect this turnaround. It's been phenomenal work by Tocchet. Patrik Allvin, he plays it pretty close to his chest, right? Doesn't tip his cards necessarily, but he did talk a little bit about the mentality going into the deadline, and especially, hey, we don't want this to just be a one-year thing. We want to make sure that this is sustainable, but also didn't rule out adding a piece. What do you guys think of what Allvin had to say about what the team might do at the deadline?
Well, I go back to him, I believe it was on 650, a clip of his, an interview with him saying he owes it to the players to be aggressive, which to me signals that they're going to make some sort of, or try to make some sort of a major move. But then you hear what he said today, and it makes you think that he has no intention to mess around with the future. When you talk about owing the players something, I wonder if part of the thinking is, and I always think this when I hear about, look at what the Bruins or the Rangers did at last year's deadline. That didn't work out. You owe it to the players to be aggressive, but on the other side, do you owe it to the players to see what this group can do come crunch time?
Yeah.
Really interesting times. Pleasant problem, right? But, which approach will he take? Because we're hearing different things in the last week or so.
Well, Rick, let me set you up. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Now, let me get this in. Listening to Allvin today, he gets back into town yesterday from Phoenix, where Rutherford, all the scouts, everybody was for 5-day meetings, for the scouting meetings. Isn't it surprising? Look, there would have been a ton of discussion for Allvin and Rutherford and the scouts in Phoenix in the past 5 days about, good debate, discussion about the prospect pool. What do we do? Look, they have finally built up the prospect pool. It was in shambles when this new regime got here, right? Now, so there would have been a lot of scouts in Arizona that would have been fighting for, hey, we got a decent prospect pool. Let's be careful. That's what I got from Allvin today is, don't everybody thinks the Canucks are going to go after a big name. Don't be surprised if they don't. They might go after a middle name range or whatever. There's nothing written in stone that they're going to – they'll look into everything, but I'm just telling you, there's nothing written in stone that they're going to go after a big name. And, and also, who in Abbotsford is ready to step in next year? How many times has Allvin said in the last couple of weeks, we're going to need kids from Abbotsford? You know why he's saying that? They can't re-sign all their 7 UFAs. So Abbotsford – is going to be big. Who can step up next year if they can't re-sign all these 7 UFAs? But I'm just telling you, everybody thinks they're going to add all these big names at the deadline. Don't be surprised if it's not a big name. If the price is too high, they can't do it.
Well, the other thing, Rick, is if you add to a team that's pressed up against the cap, you necessarily have to subtract. Yeah. What are you hearing about Big Z and Andrei Kuzmenko? What's the latest?
Well, on Big Z, do you know him well enough to call him Big Z?
No.
Isn't it Big Zed?
Isn't it Big Zed? Are you on? Are you on phone calls with him to call him Big Z, Thomas?
You know what? Fair comment.
I've never heard any.
Does Milstein call him that?
I've never heard any. Exactly. Look, I was told today the Canucks are not trying to trade Nikita Zadorov, or Big Z, as you call him, Tom. I believe there's Zadorov, Thomas, whatever.
Big T.
Tommy.
Big T. I believe the Zadorov rumors.
I was just trying to make it easier for you to pronounce.
Hey, I'll call him Big Z if you want to. If you want me to. Well, you let me finish the story. Thomas,
I want you to call him
out loud.
Zorodov.
Yeah.
I'm not calling him. I'm calling him Zadorov. Listen. Quit your cackle. Listen to me. As of now,
See what I got to put up with every day here.
It's him. It's the stress. Let me finish. As of now, Thomas, I can report the Canucks are not trying to move him. But I will say this, because a lot of people are taking shots at the media for this rumor. I'll say this. Elliot Friedman's a good friend of mine. Elliot Friedman doesn't drop stuff just for the hell of it. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Every single thing Elliot comes up with, there is something there. So I think a lot of us heard something on the weekend about Zadorov, but Dan Milstein says he won't be traded. He told me on Monday. And, I'll just say this. I'll back my good friend Friedman. But I've been told the Canucks are not gonna trade him. Not going to trade him.
Speaking
as of right now, as of today.
Speaking of Elliot Friedman and not throwing things out there lightly, he also mentioned, now he did frame this as more speculation on his part, but Andrei Kuzmenko, Chicago as a potential destination. You know, another Milstein client here, he says they're not trading Zadorov. What are you hearing on Kuzmenko, and could Chicago be a potential landing spot?
I said a couple weeks ago the teams are calling on Kuzmenko, but nobody's made an offer. I said that last week. Is it a surprise, guys? He hasn't scored in 13 games. He's obviously – if you're getting healthy, scratched, and benched in October, November, December, what's going to happen in the playoffs? Is this a player that Tocchet can, say, get out there in the playoffs if he can't play his style of game? It should be of no surprise to anyone that his name is in the rumor mill, Kuzmenko. But if it happens or not, Jamie, I don't know. His name's out there. Canucks need to clear cap space, but I'm not hearing anything imminent with Chicago and Vancouver on Kuzmenko.
That's a great point about the playoffs.
Yeah.
I mean, the trust that he
absolutely.
Well, he hasn't shown any trust in Kuzmenko this side of the 39 goals last season, but in a tight playoff game,
that's it.
He's just going to be he is going to be staple to the bench, and if they could get something for him now, and maybe a young team like Chicago has to get up to the floor, that would make a whole lot of sense. And maybe it's the best thing thing for him as well. Big
Donnie,
pay.
Look at his ice time in close games and 1-goal games in the third period. He gets 2 or 3 shifts, right? And what's going to happen in the playoffs? If you can't trust him against Columbus, they just played 4 of the 5 teams on the homestand that weren't super-duper teams other than Toronto, while the Blues are coming on. But if you can't trust this guy in the third period in games in January, February, how are you going to trust him in the playoffs?
Rick, how much do you think the softness of the rental market, if anyone wants to go read it, The Athletic, we built a list of like 10 rentals for the Canucks to consider. And man, there are not a lot of pending UFAs that are high-level, star-level guys, especially if Jake Gensel doesn't shake loose. How much might that guide the Canucks to look a little longer term?
Well, I was just told that, look, they're going to be active. They're going to make calls. They're going to look into everything. But it's got to make sense, right, Thomas? It's got to make sense. You have got Pettersson out with his hand for a huge raise. Hronik's looking at a huge raise. You got 7 UFAs. You got
Don't forget Besser at the end of next season as
got Besser at the
which maybe they didn't think about going into this season.
Big time, right there. And you've got kids in Abbotsford knocking on the door to move up. All these things have to be, Thomas, in consideration when Gensel is going to – he's not getting a pay cut on his current deal.
Nope.
If you hear of some numbers for Gensel in the offseason, crazy numbers. I'm hearing crazy numbers for Chris Tanev July 1st. There's 10-plus teams after him. You know what happens on July 1st. You don't need 10 teams on July 1st to strike you rich. You need 1 team to call you and strike a deal and overpay for you. You don't need 10.
But isn't it great we can have this conversation?
Yeah.
I'm talking about for long-suffering Vancouver hockey fans, people who listen to your show, who watch our show. Though I don't know how many people watch our show, but a lot of people listen to
all the Swifties.
So we can have this conversation. Now, all the Swifties, well,
you guys are going viral in the Swiftie corner of the universe.
I know. Just in case you were criticizing the NFL for the broadcast for showing her every 10 seconds, there's a good reason for that. But look, I mean, this is a great time. There are all these pleasant problems for the Canucks.
Yeah.
What should they do? I don't know. Well, it's because they're going to the playoffs that we're having this conversation.
Yeah,
it's
we're
great.
in for some
I'll
good
explain
hockey.
that. By the way, Thomas. Yeah, I don't know if you guys have talked about this today, but Ross Tucker, who's a regular on our show, NFL regular, is from the same hometown, Pennsylvania hometown, as Taylor Swift. So they talked to each other after the Chiefs and Ravens on Saturday. He mentioned it on our show yesterday. Some Swiftie, a Twitter account picked it up. Well over 200,000 views in a matter of hours. We've never had that before.
No.
And it just goes to show you the power of our show.
I love that Swifties are going to learn who Dan Milstein is now. They're going to be all up to date on everything happening with Milstein.
And maybe Big Z.
Yeah,
Big Z and Milstein.
Well. Their favorite hockey player.
I also like the idea that Henderson's like going to start up in the group chat being like, Rick, you got to sing Shake It Off. Thursday morning, Rick sings Shake It Off.
Got to keep those views. Got to stay viral. But to your point, Donnie, about what a good position this feels like for Canucks fans, right? And I do think, as much as we talk about, well, do they owe it to the players or should they let this group go? I mean, I think the opportunity that this team has, fans are so engaged, fans are so excited right now. I think they kind of have to try to do something to maximize their odds of going on a long playoff run here, because it's been so long since we've had that in this city, obviously since 2011, the bubble not happening in the city, so that's a little different. I just think, they talked when they re-signed Rutherford about revitalizing the brand. The best way to do that is not just make the playoffs, but take a team that's really, really good right now and go deep. And, I think if you have a chance to add even a rental, if it increases your odds of doing that, like the benefit for the fans and from a business perspective could be massive for this team.
Yeah, or do you, keep the band together and
chemistry
and see how they do. It's interesting because, we talk about adding something.
Yeah.
And so I think the number one thing people talk about is a top six forward.
Yeah.
And yet where are they when it comes to goals scored in the
Second in
National
the
Hockey League? Second in the league. And yet we all agree they need more from that so-called second line. It's pretty interesting. And a lot of that, and Rick made this point on our show today, was the best point you made on the show today, about their defense and how much it's contributed to the offense. So there's room for improvement there, but it's just interesting that their number one problem, you wonder if it's a problem at all.
Yeah, everybody keeps talking about top six forward. They're second in the league in goals for, guys. And Quinn Hughes is a big part of that, right? He brings so much offense from the back end. But I tell you, like I was just told today that, everyone's expecting a big name to end up in Vancouver. Maybe that doesn't happen and they just add depth or whatever else there is. But the expectations are so high in Vancouver, and obviously they're going to look into something. But don't be surprised if they just add around the edges as well.
You brought up Chris Tanev. To me, I don't know. As you said, there's going to be a lot of teams interested in July 1st. You're hearing some crazy prices potentially. But, that was all. The only reason the Zadorov stuff made any sense to me was, okay, do you send him out so you can get Chris Tanev in? Is that the kind of thing, like if you think you can get a deal done with Chris Tanev, right, where you're not sure you can with Nikita Zadorov, like is that a situation you could see, hey, bring in Tanev, get him signed for an extension before he even hits the open market in July?
I don't know, because I was told that when Zadorov was signed that, he was traded for by Vancouver, that they would get an extension done at some time.
Right.
Milstein worked really hard to get Zadorov to Vancouver, and I was told that, part of the plan was, we're going to seriously take a run at signing this guy, right? So I don't know if something went sideways or whatever, but the plan was, when it comes to Chris Tanev, and if he hits the free agent market July 1st, I know one thing. Chris Tanev loves Vancouver. He's got a lot of good friends here. And I would believe that, I don't know if the Canucks can afford him or whatever. They got Myers out there. Isn't it interesting? And Donnie and I talked about this. Myers and Tanev are going to be 34 on July 1st. And they're going to have a lot of teams after him, and they're going to, because why, guys? They're right shot D, veteran D. Tanev is so well respected in the league by coaches, GMs, and players. Vancouver will be high on his list, guys. I know that for a fact, but I don't know if the Canucks can get him on July 1st.
Thanks, gentlemen. Love doing this crossover with you. And in brackets, this edition of the crossover, by the way, is Taylor's version. Don Taylor's version.
Yeah.
Wow. I got a big laugh.
Rick has no idea. I actually know what you're talking about Rick has no clue.
I don't have a clue. I'm looking at Thomas right now, and I'm clueless looking at Thomas.
That was a
hey, I'll
that was
try
a
and have
blank
big
stare.
Z. Yeah. I'll try and have a Big Z update for you next week, Thomas.
Thank you.
All right, Big Z, we love him here. All right, thanks,
A
fellas.
Big Z update from Big D.
Thanks,
Let's
guys.
go.
We'll do this next week. Thanks, guys. That is Don Taylor and Rick Dhaliwal from Donnie and Dhali on Check TV. You can check them out Monday to Friday, 10 to noon.